Hi, I'm Ross Purnell, editor and publisher of Fly Fisherman Magazine. Welcome to Loop to Loop. It's a show where we make deeper connections with the people behind the magazine. We are sponsored today by Patagonia. If you enjoy this podcast, please support our sponsor and check out their amazing new line of Swift Current waders. They've got two basic men's models, Expedition and Traverse. I've worn them both. The Traverse zip fronts, amazing for summertime, hot weather, long distance adventures. The Expedition waders are the ones you want for the winter time or when you're crawling around on your hands and knees. They've got padded knee pads for stealthy approach, and it's a really great wader for cold weather, which is coming. We're also sponsored today by G. Loomis, American-made fly rods made in Woodland, Washington. I just got back from a trip to Bolivia and was using NRX Plus 8 weights and 10 weights for golden dorado. There was a lot of broken rods on that trip, but none of my NRX Pluses, and they were awesome for throwing, making like pinpoint casts with really big flies. So check those out. If you enjoy this podcast, you can support us by subscribing to Fly Fisherman Magazine. To do that online, it's real easy. Just go to flyfisherman.com and there's a subscribe button up in the top right-hand corner. You can also support us by following us on social media. On Instagram, we are at Fly Fisherman Magazine. On Facebook, at Fly Fisherman. And hopefully you are watching Loop to Loop on our YouTube channel. The video version is really great. We're going to be looking at a lot of flies today. So check out the YouTube version on our YouTube channel at Fly Fisherman Magazine. Our guest today is the legendary Tom Baltz. And I say legendary because as soon as I moved to this area over 20 years ago, he was firmly established as the Grandmaster Poobah of fly tying and guiding in Cumberland Valley. His flies are legendary. His expertise is well known. And he's a big player in conservation issues and all of the local things that are going on in Pennsylvania and Cumberland Valley. But you also travel a lot, so it's going to be an interesting conversation. Thanks for coming to the studio today, Tom.
Thank you for the invitation.
A lot of things to talk about today.
There are. Aside from just fishing, there's always something else going on.
Well, it's mostly all going to be about fishing. But I'm curious about a lot of things. One of the things I wanted to talk to you is about how you got started fly fishing. How does a Tom Baltz get created?
I don't know. I just grew up fishing. My father was an avid fisherman, although not really a fly angler. But he had lots of, at that time, there weren't that many around, but angling books, fly fishing books, which I'm pretty sure my mother bought him for things like birthday presents and so forth. Whether he read them, I have no idea. But, Ray Bergman's Trout and the old original Family Circle Guide to Trout Flies, which has been reprinted a million times as the Knoll Guide to Trout Flies, which has been in like fly tying kits and, everywhere for 70 years probably. But a couple other books like that they were all about fly fishing, and I lived in New Mexico at that time. I'm originally from Albuquerque, but all the books were from the Catskills. So I always wanted to come fish the Catskills, which I still have not done very much of. But I liked fish. I liked birds. I began to make this connection. Birds have feathers. Flies have feathers. So it just kind of all blended. I didn't know anybody that fly fished or tied flies or anything, and I just started raiding my mother's sewing basket and holding the hook and the pliers. And my father had an old herder's vise, which he gave me, and some old stuff that he had, and then he got me a herder's catalog, which, oh man, I just wish I had one today just to thumb through it now and then. Look
that was the Bible back in the day, wasn't it?
He had everything, and the prices were... the grade A jungle cock capes were $8.50, but I was mowing a big lawn with a push mower, not with a motor on it, for $2 a trip. it was taking me quite a while to get $8 together. So I never could justify a jungle cock neck, but I still have odds and ends I bought from herders. 6 pair of speckled turkey quills were 30 cents for the package.
Wow.
Now they're like, $5 a pair or more, so forth and so on. Yeah, herders was great. Started tying flies, and then we moved to Maryland. My father was a geologist, and he got an appointment with what was then the Atomic Energy Commission with earthquake studies and atomic waste disposal and whatnot. And I'm sure a lot of classified. He never talked a lot about it, but when we moved east, he was road tripping to Hanford, Washington, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee a lot, the two oldest and nastiest breeder reactors in the country where the original atom bombs and hydrogen bombs were made. So the war was on. They just threw everything out the back door, so to speak. They weren't too careful about what they did with their extra stuff. At any rate, we moved to Maryland, so I started. Rock Creek Park was right down the street from my house, and they stocked some trout in there, but there was other odds and ends of fish in there, and we were kids, I had some flies I tied. Anything was, if I could catch a fish on a fly, it was good. I had caught some trout on flies in New Mexico before we moved, but I started really fly fishing a lot more. And when one of us, I forget, one of my buddies, somebody got a driver's license, and then we were a little bit more mobile. We fished the Catoctin Mountains in Maryland a lot, and really cut our teeth up there. There's little brook trout streams, and then Big Hunting Creek is a pretty well-known, the most famous, maybe the most famous trout stream in Maryland. That was the birthplace of the Brotherhood of the Jungle Cock. Joe Brooks and all those guys
Really
hung there, and that's where the Jungle Cock started. So, we tied flies and went up there all the time, and little by little, that was always a catch and release fly only, I believe, back then. But the other creeks in the Catoctins were, they were open water. So we'd always have a can of worms just in case. And the time I think that really turned it was we were camping, my one friend and my youngest brother, on Owens Creek, just north of Thurmont, Maryland. And Maryland would stock and close the stream for 2 weeks. Theoretically, the trout would spread out. Mostly they spread out to the locals' freezers, I think. But there was still some left. In the home pool, there was a bunch of fish. And we thought we got up early, but the pool was already surrounded when we crawled out of our tents and walked over there. A lot of fish on stringers, but nobody was catching anything. And you could see there was still a lot of fish in there. So we weren't catching them either, fishing worms. And we always fished with fly rods, even though we were bait fishing. And I put on a Royal Coachman wet fly, and I could still see that thing fluttering through the pool, and the fish just clobbered. They just smashed them. So everybody went home because we were letting them go. They didn't like that. But we did what we could do in that pool, fished downstream a little ways, went back to the worms, nothing. Put
So
that
you were
wet
swinging
fly
the
on.
Coachman?
Just kind of drifting it, not really even swinging it. But we didn't know the formalities of it. We were just fishing it just like we fished anything else. It just was,
Just fooling around and discovering.
kind of. Little by little, we figured we already knew how to fish. We just needed to figure out a little bit about the flies. A little common sense, Big Hunting Creek got warm. Summertime, there's no hatch. We go there. You see fish rising here or there. What are they going to be taking? Well, probably some ants, maybe something like that. So little by little, we just kind of figured out some of the flies to use. And I've kind of always done that. I can still remember one of the earliest. I can remember the first nice trout I ever caught in a LeTort. I didn't really know what to use, but I just picked something out and started fishing with it. And little by little, we learned about the flies to use in there. I caught my first trout right at the upper edge of LeTort Park in Carlisle on I didn't have jungle cock, but we made the same kind of a fly. I think I was in 11th grade. I had my, 7-foot Fenwick rod I was so proud of and so forth. So that's kind of how we started. I started coming up to Pennsylvania more and more. Joe Brooks' classic article that he had, I believe it was in Outdoor Life. It's called A Weekend in Carlisle.
Really?
And fact, a friend of mine, Mike Val, I just had dinner with the other evening over the weekend here, and he just put a post up about his weekend in Carlisle, and he had that magazine opened up to that article. I wish I had that copy, but wow, these streams aren't that far away. I lived in Rockville, Maryland, and they're like inside of 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So I still remember fishing that weekend. We came up. My dad brought my brother and I up, and we caught a couple in the LeTort. They were rising like crazy, just sipping away, just like it said in that article. And, again, I didn't have jungle cock, but similar flies.
What year would have that been? You were in 11th grade?
66 or 7.
That was pretty
Something
much
like
in the heyday of the LeTort.
It was nice. Yeah, it was that weekend in Carlisle. Joe Brooks was up with Charlie Fox and Vince and some of their friends. Most people would know most of those names. Ross Trimmer was integral. Norm Leitner. I met Ross. I never met Norm Leitner. He was, but anyway, that whole group that fished together and hung out at Charlie's place on the LeTort. They called that the 19th hole because they all golfed, I guess. And anyway, this is where they sat around after they were done fishing and cooked hot dogs and whatever. But
there's a lot of people out there in the fly fishing world that don't, especially like newcomers, they don't understand how this, like what you're talking about, the Cumberland Valley or the LeTort Spring Run nucleus, like that group of people on that water were hugely influential in the development of the sport of fly fishing, in our literature and the flies that we have. It's like that was really a fountain of fly fishing that was spread all over the world. Can you dive into that a little bit? I mean, clearly it influenced you, but it influenced everybody.
I had, before I lived in Pennsylvania, I had Vince Marinaro's book and Charlie Fox's book, This Wonderful World of Trout. Vince's book, of course, A Modern Dry Fly Code. That book was written in 1950, and it's still, I would highly recommend reading that, especially if you're interested in fishing the Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Cumberland Valley area. The fishing isn't exactly like it was, but that book particularly set the stage. But Charlie's book, This Wonderful World of Trout, also really chronicled some of those things, how they developed terrestrial insects. The LeTort was never a big hatch factory. It had some sulfurs, had some little blue-wing olives, and they never wrote about too much else. And there was a few caddis here and there. And back in the day, the lower reaches of it, north of Carlisle, actually were mostly polluted by some factories in Carlisle. But that's all cleaned up now, and there is some fishing down there. But yeah, they talked about, Vince's whole book, A Modern Dry Fly Code, wasn't about classic hatch matching like the old chalk stream fisheries in England. And Vince was very much an Anglophile. He was really into trying to bring the traditions of the English chalk streams over to the LeTort, which in so many ways very similar to those streams. One big difference here is our substrate, our limestone, is rock that has these underground rivers, these springs flowing through it, and they surface occasionally. Boom, we have a stream. The English chalk streams they run through chalk formations, so they don't have quite the spring head like ours does. The water just kind of oozes in from everywhere, I think. Not having been there myself, maybe someday. But anyway, the chemistry of the streams, the character, full of weeds, rising fish, and those sorts of things were all very similar, but what were they rising to? And they took them a while to figure those things out. I remember Charlie Fox telling me about how they figured out when Vince first came up with the jacid, the little jungle cock nail tied flat on top of the hook with some hackle under it. Real simple fly. Vince always said that was the first high-vis fly. I'm not sure that it was. There were some real big rivalries going on between the Carlisle crowd and the State College group, led by, of course, George Harvey. He and Vince weren't really best friends.
A little competitive, huh?
Yeah, there was that. And they were both just gnarly old guys, that they were first generation all their parents came, they were all immigrants. And they lived out in the country. Vince was from Reynoldsville or somewhere like that up in Jefferson County or someplace like that. And he didn't really live in the Harrisburg area until I think after he had gotten out. Vince was a lawyer, so he lived and practiced in the Harrisburg area. But
Vince Marinaro, you had contact with him. Did you fish with him?
Oh yeah. When I first came to Pennsylvania, I was working in the Yellow Breeches Fly Shop, which is now TCO Fly Shop in Boiling Springs. They still have the second generation. Maybe that's the first generation sign that we had out in front. They have that in the store. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I think about the fourth or fifth day I was working in there with Billy Skilton, he was just out of high school. I think he was out of high school, but he was. And I look at somebody's coming in. I look, and there's Vince Marinaro. I mean, if you saw a picture of him, you wouldn't miss him for anyone else. So I said, Billy, look who's coming in, and Vince had never been in there before. Again, some rivalries. I don't know the ins and outs, but something about between Vince and Ed Koch. Vince wouldn't come in there as long as Ed Koch was around. I don't know why. Vince was kind of gnarly anyway. Vince wouldn't do a lot of things that wouldn't bother anyone else. But Vince eventually fell out with everybody, even Charlie Fox, and they kind of reconciled later on. And that was over the Big Spring issue. I remember Vince, the first time he came in the store, we had a fly tying bench in there, and he didn't very often sit down at that bench. He would watch you sit down at that bench, and he would watch you tie, and occasionally he'd say something like, too many turns of thread, or not that exactly, but something like that. Just you're putting too much on, or do it this way, or try this, or something. They didn't take you by the hand and walk you through the entire process. I mean, they would throw out a little tip here and there, see what you did with it. If they liked it, they might throw another one out at some point. That was kind of the way today everybody wants the full tutorial for free. Why don't you do some? I get asked all the time, why don't you do some YouTube stuff? I'm going like, why should I do that? Why should I just do that? So I haven't done very much, but at any rate, that's how those guys taught you and mentored you.
It's best to give people a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. First of all, you can't, whether it's fly tying or casting, you can't learn everything at one time. You have to take one skill, hone it, and then you're ready for another one. I mean, people don't learn that fast in the first place.
And
you have to show some dedication too, right? If you keep persistently coming back asking for more, then, you're interested.
Vince didn't want you to be tying his stuff necessarily. He wanted you to learn the techniques, the theories, which feathers were good for what. I learned so much about materials, not exactly what to think, but how to think about. Show me a feather and I can think of some things I would do with it. Some feathers work better for dry flies. Some feathers work better for wet flies because of the way they do or don't shed water. Duck feathers are better for dry flies. Game bird feathers, partridge and things like that are really good on wet flies because they do soak water up and they work well in the water. If you're going to tie a wet fly, you want it to sink, so forth and so on. So I learned an awful lot about how to think about different materials and about something I still don't see that much of today because when I talk about it, I don't think people really get it. People think of flies in terms of patterns. Well, patterns to me are look at Catskill flies. And not all of them, but so many of them. The difference between a light Cahill, a light Hendrickson, a dark Hendrickson, et cetera, is the color of the feathers. The design of the fly is exactly the same.
It's the same fly, yeah.
Exactly.
Basically.
So Vince wanted to think more in terms of fly design and less about exactly what color it was. Oh, everybody has a fly to match a sulfur and a fly to match a Hendrickson, et cetera, and so forth. But it was that design aspect that was so important to Vince. And of course, how they developed the flies they developed to to fish these streams that weren't big hatch streams, but the fish were eating something, ants, beetles, those little leafhoppery things, and so forth. So, if had they just thought in terms of pattern, who knows where we would be today? Somebody would have figured it out eventually, obviously, but again, it was a whole new way of thinking about not only surface fishing, because the earliest terrestrials, Charlie Fox's friend Bob McCafferty was a commercial fly tyer, and the first ants that they made were just 2 lumps of fur with some hackle in between, and they didn't float very well. They fished them wet. In fact, before that, there was the hard-bodied ant, two humps of black thread and some hackle in between, and the thread was covered with head cement. It wasn't going to float at all.
No.
And they weren't really tying little teeny flies too much because, even after the war a little bit, World War II, certainly prior to it, the leaders and the tackle that these guys were fishing. Now, Vince built his own rods for many, many years, but still leaders, there was no nylon, like we talk about today. There was no 5X or 4X, there was drawn silkworm gut.
Wow.
And
going back that far.
Something that would be equivalent to 4X was about as fine as you could get that stuff, I think. And it was really, really delicate. I have bits and pieces of those old leaders, for making blind iron salmon flies and stuff. The eyes are made out of that, a couple pieces twisted together and so forth. And you have to soak that stuff it's like wire until you soak it. And then it's really kind of nasty, gummy feeling. It's weird. But I'm glad I didn't have to fish that stuff. When I started fly fishing, at least we would get spools of leader material. Gladding was notable back in those days. And I can't remember for sure I think they put diameters on there, but the X system that most people are familiar with today, that was all developed, I'm going to say in the 60s, but I couldn't say for sure when it became popular. But the American Fishing Tackle Manufacturers Association, a trade group, tried to standardize some of these things. That's when we came out with fly lines that were 3-weight, 4-weight, 5-weight, et cetera, because prior to the plastic-coated lines that everybody knows about today, I doubt there's a fly fisher around that hasn't fished with them. Everybody's line was silk. And then they went by diameter because silk is silk. It's all the same specific gravity. So the only way of changing the weight of that fly line was going to be to change the diameter. So I still see on some of these Facebook groups, old bamboo rod identification groups and so forth, guys will like, what does HDH mean? What line weight should I use?
What line should I put on this old bamboo rod?
HDH is the double taper 6 because, A was heavy, but B, C, D, E were getting finer and finer and finer. So you took H, D, H, that was a double taper 6, so forth.
Okay.
HC was a 7-weight. So, but all the lines were basically silk. So when they started to transition over to the plastic-coated lines with usually a braided core, they became very popular because they were way less expensive and way less maintenance free too. Silk lines, if you go fish with it and leave it on a reel and just put it away, it may not be in any kind of shape at all. They have a finish on them. It gets gummy, and you have to really take care of them. A lot of effort. Today, people are busy and they put their stuff away wet and in all kind of other shape that's not good for it, and then they wonder why it doesn't work that well next time they go fishing. Like next season. But
it's amazing the handicaps that these guys like Marinaro and Fox and the old guys had to deal with.
Absolutely.
Was that the golden age then, or is it now? With if they saw feathers that we have to work with today, they'd think they'd never seen anything like it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Of course Vince especially tied pretty much everything with natural material, but he used nylon thread. He didn't just use like old silk or something. He did on some flies, but other flies, but the just total plethora of the synthetics that we have out today. I mean, there's guys that don't use feathers at all. I like feathers, so I still use feathers. But I also incorporate some of the synthetics, and I have to believe that had that stuff been available back in the day, whenever that might be, that those guys would have used it too.
Yeah.
Because they were using some other crazy stuff when some of the more maybe progressive tires would use what we might call a gum band today, a rubber band, India rubber bodies. On even Halford had, flies in his book. His first book was called Floating Flies. You start reading some of the recipes in there. It takes you a little while to figure out what they're talking about because it's such archaic English, and like I never heard that called that before. So forth. So
What do you call it?
I think they called it India rubber or something like that, but it was basically looked like rubber band from what I remember. I haven't read that book for a while. I have it, but I haven't looked through it for a long time.
So he was tying squirmy wormies?
No. They would wrap that on for the body like on a dry fly. Floating flies, obviously. There's no nymphs in there.
Yeah.
Halford was, all about dry fly fishing.
And you would wind the rubber on there, huh?
For a body on some of those. And we think of that all being new and revolutionary today. But again, there's so many synthetics out there and some of the use of them. I had to tie some flies. I tie for these guys that live over, Easton area, but they fish up on the upper Delaware a lot. And they're pretty picky about their flies. So I tie some stuff for them, and the guy he sends me samples at least, but he doesn't have any idea how they're made. Here, tie these. So I get these flies, and they were slate drakes. So they're pretty good sized flies. Okay, they're comparadons. That's not too hard, but what is this body? It took me a long time and a number of trips to the fly shop to buy a pack of this, that, and the other to figure out what that body was. So I finally nailed it. It was like that plastic tubing. That was the body of this fly. And a little fur thorax and a deer hair wing. The rest of it was pretty simple. But it took a while to figure out what that body material was. So that's part of the fun of fly tying. I mean, it depends on what you want to put into it. Some people don't have as much time, or that, they go fly fishing this weekend. Next weekend they're going golfing with their buddies. And I had this couple out one time. The lady booked a trip. She was friends with Kim Lemon, who used to be an anchor at Channel 8 News over in Lancaster. And I had her fishing too, which was an interesting trip. But this friend of hers and her husband came out, and we were down by Allenbury at one point in the day, and we walked by the tennis courts, and she started talking about that. I said, "Excuse me, but I don't even know how you keep score. I don't play tennis." "Oh," she said, "I thought you would do that." I go, I put everything. You liked my casting earlier? That's because I put everything into this. I don't play golf. I don't play tennis. I don't play paddle.
It's your whole life.
It is. I fly fish, and that's it. I fish. I haven't for a while, but I do enjoy some other kinds of fishing too, with artificial lures. But I mean, bass fishing can be a lot of fun. Whether it's smallmouth fishing on the river or even largemouth bass fishing. Get out in a boat. I talk to people all the time. "Well, I don't like lake fishing." It's because you don't know about lakes. If you learn about
Haven't
lakes,
learned it, or not fishing the right lakes.
you have to learn about water temperatures in a lake. You have to learn about the depth. You have to learn about structure. You have to learn about the fish. Some fish don't relate to structure that much. They're pelagic. There's schools of them out in the middle of the lake someplace swimming around. But still, they use structure in some fashion when they're feeding or whatever. They trap their bait fish against weed beds or the bank or whatever it may be, the surface. A lot of ways to think about edges. So you learn about the type fish you're after. I like largemouth bass fishing in a lake. You got to learn about it. Some lakes are deep and clear, and some lakes are shallow and weedy. Big difference right there. Shallow and weedy, okay, you can tie a surface lure on and throw it around, and sooner or later you're going to catch some fish. Deep and clear, and two local lakes we have, Lake Marburg would fit the deep and clear. No matter what, you're usually fishing between 15 and 25 feet of water.
Lake
They're not
Marburg?
throwing.
I've never even heard of that.
Oh yeah, down just east of Hanover.
Okay.
It was Project 70. It's a state park. It was basically built to feed the water to the paper mill in Spring Grove, which is now closed, and I don't know what's going on with the dam down there, who exactly operates it. I heard some private equity outfit bought it. I'm like, I have no idea why they would buy this dam, but so the little tailwater fishery below it, apparently you never know what you're going to get. Well, you never really did know what you were going to get when you went down there to go fishing. There's no way to really check. You drive all the way, drive an hour down there, and if it's lousy, you can stop in Hanover and get some ice cream on the way back and go home or whatever. But
you're a guide and commercial fly tyer, right?
Yeah.
You still do a lot of guiding, don't you?
Yeah, as much as I can.
Where do you mostly do your guiding on?
Home water's the Yellow Breeches. It's the longest stream in the Carlisle, the Cumberland Valley area, the longest bona fide trout stream. Mostly stocked from one end to the other. We'll probably talk about some stockfish a little bit later, I guess, but it would not be a wild trout fishery throughout its length, even if they let it be. If they quit stocking it, there would be trout, but they would be limited and it wouldn't be very popular. Right now, it's one of the most popular streams in the state, primarily because they stock the heck out of it. There's other streams in the area. People sometimes want to go fish one of the spring creeks. The Yellow Breeches is a limestone stream. That means it kind of spring creeky in its upper reaches. It's fed by a lot of springs throughout its length, but also has little streams that come out of the mountains that are more freestone in nature. And the stream itself it's our largest stream in the area, by various accounts, 50 miles plus long. And it varies in character. It's got a mostly fine gravel bottom. There's a few rocks here and there. It crosses limestone ledges in places. The spring creeks are pure. They're just springs, and Big Spring says it all. It's a big spring, also fed by smaller springs throughout its length. Those streams are short, 5 or 6 miles is about it. The LeTort, Big Spring, some of the other little ones around the area.
They're short because they flow into another bigger river.
Right.
Most
of them flow into the Conneaut Creek. Falling Spring actually is in the Potomac River watershed. So it flows into the Conackachee, which flows into the Potomac. That big Falling Spring is down at Chambersburg.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're actually in a different watershed down there. But all our streams to about south to Shippensburg area are mostly going to flow into the Conneaut. So it's a limestone stream
TCO
itself.
had a big party this weekend, a fly fishing festival, and I saw pictures of you out in the Yellow Breeches giving a demonstration. How was that?
It was fun. Something a little bit different. You go to the fly fishing shows and you see casting demos, but you're pretty limited what you can do when you just have that little pond and the water's not moving or anything. And everybody wants to see if you can throw all the line on the reel and so forth, or tell jokes like Lefty used to. I don't do any of that. I never did a demo at one of the fly shows, but I did it last year, maybe the last couple of years at this TCO thing. We get right in the stream, and I talk about basically dry fly. I expand it a little bit, not just dry fly casting, but some different tactical tips too. Is like where, standing certain place relative to where you're trying to fish, whether I should cast the standard way upstream and maybe a cross current, or whether maybe I should turn and throw downstream now and then. So I talked about that. And when I say dry fly casting, I'm talking about the standard cast with a fly rod for trout fishing, which is basically short strokes, nice stops. Don't throw that line down at the water. People want to extend their arm and try and throw it. You've got some fly rods are costing well over $1,000 these days. If you want to cast with your arm, don't buy a $1,000 rod. Just cast with your arm. If you're going to buy a $1,000 rod, make that rod do some work. They're highly engineered equipment, and they're really beautiful to fish with. But it's like, if you can't hit the nail, you're not going to be a carpenter either. So you want to learn how to do the basic cast, and then all the variations of that, throwing some slack. we try and find ways to ask people like things like, how many of you tie your own leaders and stuff? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I talk about tying your own leaders versus using the leader right out of the package. We all use some
or
of
dry
those
fly fishing.
for dry fly fishing specifically. There's times, I suppose, even for dry fly fishing, where they would be appropriate. And of course, one brand of leader is quite different from somebody else's in the knotless leaders. But when I tie my own leader, I know exactly what I have. I have a little leader gauge it's called Micrite. I don't think they make them anymore, but micrometers are really expensive. But when I buy my stuff that I use to tie my leaders, I mic it all because they usually lie, especially the brand that I use for, say, 2/3 of I'm mostly using the Maxima Green, which is a little softer. Of course, this is a George Harvey style leader, and George always talked about, the hard mono and the soft mono, and I still have some of that stuff, but the mono we have today is so much better than that stuff was. And we used to come
light years ahead.
Some of the sections that George have, and I still have some somewhere, but he got it from E. Hilly, which was the old material and tackle supply house up near Williamsport, Pennsylvania. It was one of the just shy of herders for getting good stuff. But the pieces didn't come on a spool. They were 20 or 22 inches long. Coincidentally, so many of the sections in George's leaders are 20 inches. He was just tying those sections together, and he worked out some tapers. I don't know that he for sure worked them out. George was an interesting character, but if you listen to him, you'd think he pretty much invented all of it. But if you read George LeBranche's book, which came out in maybe 1906, called A Dry Fly in Fast Water, all of it's in there, more or less.
Yeah.
Those
We're all
guys,
learning from everyone else and adapting.
Yeah, and expanding in many cases. So that's, again, you got a foundation, you expand on a little bit, and that's good. But yeah, LeBranche and those guys were building what we would call, and they were bamboo rods, cane rods, which were pretty early in their development. But those guys really developed tapers to build rods that we would call dry fly rods today. They weren't the old soft, people think of a bamboo action, these old soft buggy whip type rods. Those are not the kind of rods that these guys were building and fishing with. It's not the material in the rod, it's the tapers, the designs of the rods. But yeah, George talked about that. I heard him say later in life, though, that he thought maybe he'd been on the wrong track the whole time, and he should have been using softer material for the entire leader, because his thing was roughly 2/3 of it was his hard, stiff nylon, and then he had a transition and tippet section on there of softer material to get the famous S curves that he always talked about. But you not only need to tie your leader right and match it to your fly, and that all gets a little tedious. Most people don't want to get into it that far. They buy a leader and they put it on their line and they tie a fly on and they go fish and they have some success, which is probably the worst thing that could happen to them. But
when you're dry fly fishing, you tie all your own leaders.
For my own fishing, yeah, mine are all, I tie those.
Do you tie those in the winter and have sets of them
or
all
I hate
pre-made?
I have leaders I tied years ago. I just keep rebuilding them.
Okay.
So, that you can change them around. I know once I've got the leader built, I know without the mic, I started up here, so it goes bing, 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 bing. I know the progression. So if I broke the leader in half or I make a big giant change in it, I can still get back to where I was because, you just memorize that stuff. It's not too hard, really. The diameters drop down by, 2/1000ths of an inch each time or something like that. Until you get to the fine stuff where you only drop 1/1000th. But it's not that hard. It doesn't take that long. I think tying leaders is not all that much fun. I got 2 cats. They want to help. And they seem to know when there's something like that in the room that I'm fooling around with, they magically appear and get in the middle of it. So tying leader is a pain in the neck. But I want my tackle to perform. When you're
Functions
out there,
better.
absolutely. I fish those leaders. Like we go out west. I have a really dear friend of mine who was a client, and he started inviting me on some trips. And now we have a little group of us that go out to Montana, Yellowstone for a couple of days, and Madison. I've really gotten to enjoy the Madison. I love fast water dry fly fishing. There's so many interesting little places to drop a fly. But then we also fish the Missouri, which is kind of a humongous spring creek. It's a tailwater, but it functions and fishes like a giant spring creek.
Slow and flat.
Mostly slow and flat, and fish get pounded. They're kind of picky. And it's wide open, too, so the wind can howl. I mean, the wind can blow. Mostly it's not that bad, but I hear guys griping when it's 5 to 10 around here. Out there, if you hit a 5 to 10 day, everybody would be like, man,
it's a
I
good
wish
day.
the wind would turn on a little bit here. So, yeah.
Did you go this year yet?
Oh, yeah. We were out late June, early July. Had a blast. Fishing was a little tougher. The hatches were a little ahead. It's been hot and dry out there. So we had tricos, but like one morning the wind came up early and blew all the flies away. So there was nothing to, it was hard to find any rising fish. We still caught fish, but you go peck around, look around the edges. But the fish are spooky. You're throwing long casts. Most people are probably fishing a 5-weight, 9-foot 5-weight out there. Some of them might even be throwing 6 weights. I've got a 4-weight and, leaders that are pushing 12 feet long or so. And they don't bother me anymore. We've been fishing with some of these same guides for 20 years. Mm-hmm. But at first they looked at that and they looked at me like, oh, what am I? Like, no, you should do this. Like, I want to fish my way, row the boat, show me where the fish are, and we'll see what we can do with that. If my way's not working, I'll listen and see what you have to say. Yeah, one of them, who he and I have had our differences over the years as far as philosophy of fishing, but we've gotten to be pretty good friends too, because one of the other guys said, I don't like fishing with Greg. He wants to catch every fish in the river. I said, that's exactly why I like fishing with him. So we get along pretty well that way. But he'll pick up one of these rods he likes. He's got this old stiff rod. I won't mention brand names, but man, this thing doesn't even bend, and at least compared to what I'm used to. And he's got what's left of a leader on there that, I don't know, maybe if they were throwing streamers last time, I don't know. But I just like 3 casts, I'm going like, I can't fish with this rod. So I'm an Orvis
Like to have
guide,
your stuff, your own stuff.
I'm used to that, and I like the Orvis tackle, and these Helios rods are awesome equipment. If you like Winston or something else, like go for it. It's what you get used to. They're all good. But I like those Orvis Helios outfits.
I wanted to talk to you today about your flies. You're obviously a well-known guide, casting instructor, make your own leaders and everything, but you're pretty famous as a fly tyer. And your most famous fly, I think it's safe to say, is Paranymph?
Yeah, that's probably number one signature fly, I guess. I didn't tie parachute flies for a long, long time because I guess a little too much of Vince Marinaro influence. He wanted them, dry flies had to be dry. Parachute flies aren't all that dry. But I always kind of I thought about this fly for years before I actually tied a prototype, which I did actually with some guys. We were just messing around in the fly shop down there in Boiling Springs one day. And I said, I never tied parachutes to speak of, but here's an idea. Let's make it a floating nymph. And it eventually morphed into the fly that I tie today. I always thought, well, what's number one nymph material in the world? Arguably, hare's mask. This gold-ribbed hare's ear predates any pheasant tails or anything like that. But so I started making the bodies just out of, I blend my own hare's mask. But that stuff, it's good dry fly material. I tie the body kind of rough because if it's a nymph, I want it to have all the little legs and gills and various little bits of movement that a nymph would have right at the surface. So I don't know how much much you can really see that, but kind of the trailing shuck thing going on there, hare's mask body, parachute hackle, wound with the shiny side down so that you get an upside down umbrella sort of effect, and it lets that body of the nymph kind of push down in the surface film a little bit. If I would tie a dun, like a sulfur dun, newly hatched, drifting along, getting ready to fly away, I tie that with the hackle with the shiny side up so that I have an umbrella shape. And if I just throw a couple of these on the table mixed together, everybody go, oh yeah, you're just tying some parachutes. But big differences between shiny side up, shiny side down. And I used to bring a little slant tank to the fly shows and drop these flies on it. And from the underside, you can see quite a bit of difference.
So with the Paranymph, the hackle is cupped downward.
It's like this. It's like an upside down umbrella.
Okay. It's cupped up.
On a dun, sulfur dun,
the hackle's down.
It's down like this, and it stands up on it. And I pinch it hard. I really want that thing pushed down tightly so that it stands up a little bit.
Stands up more.
And it makes a difference.
So for a dry fly, it's like an umbrella. For Paranymph, the hackle's like an upside down umbrella.
Right.
So the body of the nymph's down
kind
more.
of pushed in the water a little bit.
And another feature of that is you put high vis wings on all of these.
I do. And that orange obviously is a high vis. I tied this color, yellow, not chartreuse, but just like a lemon yellow. I find that to be the most visible. And that's for low light, dark background. Note Harry Murray's Mr. Rapidan series of flies. Fishing, if you've ever fished, especially down there in Shenandoah Park or those little mountain streams, the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia are pretty good sized mountains. Even the Blue Ridge, they're pretty good sized mountains. And the mountains right on the West Virginia border, those streams, a lot of them are different than our mountain streams. A lot of our mountain streams are down in the valleys. They still look kind of freestony mountain stream, but they don't have quite the gradient. It's a little different sort of stream. Those streams cut down these little these canyons. Some of them are pretty respectable. And you're fishing, each pool is a climb to get up to it. Next pool, oh my God, I got to climb over all these big rocks. But it's dark and there's a lot of big old trees. It's been a long, long, long time since any of that was logged. And you're looking down at dark background. These yellow wings really show up real well. You could get by with the orange, but the yellow is even better. And then the black, I didn't invent any of these, but that black wing, I probably use the orange 85% of the time. The black, I'd say 10%, but maybe not quite. The other 15% is split between those two wing colors.
I really like a black parachute wing.
You're on
the
flat
contrast is really good for my eyes anyways.
If you're in bumpy water, I'd probably if I can, I'd try and get away with the bright wings. But I know I had some tied up in there in my box, and we were on the Missouri in Montana, and the water was flat, like tabletop flat. And there's a pod of big rainbows just sipping away. And they're in about 18 inches of water, give or take. And you couldn't get real close to them. But I'm in the back of the boat. Long cast and then shake some line out, trying to get them to eat. And they would eat, but I had to, we were fishing size 18 flies too, not these are size 12s. But they would eat that fly. And the only reason I know they ate it is because every now and then there would be a big scuffle down there. I know one of them ate it, got spooked, spit it out, and scared the other ones. And after a couple minutes, they'd start rising again. So that happened about twice. I thought, well, I know we don't have too many opportunities here before they're going to take off. So Greg, he wanted to pull the anchor and go find some other fish. I go like, Greg, no. Those guys are about catching fish. I'm like interested in solving the problem why we didn't catch any of these fish. What can we do? So glare, kind of overcast day, brutal glare. I pulled one of those little size 18s out with that black post on it. First cast, like 19 and a half inch rainbow. So I was done. I gave one to the guy, my friend in the front of the boat, and said, John, catch a couple. He tied it on. He caught a couple real quick. And then we don't want to beat up Greg's whole pot of fish. He had clients tomorrow too, you know. So we caught a couple, we made our point, and we moved on. But I've since gone to that black wing, especially out there.
And in the glare,
in the glare,
when it's cloudy or in the evening.
Yeah, if you don't have any glare, stick with the bright colored wings.
Agree,
but
100%.
The Delaware in the east here would be a super classic example of another place where that black wing would just be. And I've never fished the South Holston, but that looks like a lot of flat water down there too. Some of those streams, especially when you're in a boat, you're casting a lot of times in along the banks. And a lot of times got to throw some line too. The fish get spooky. They see a lot of boats, they get pounded. Even these big rivers take a lot of pressure. The Missouri's big. It soaks up a fair amount of pressure, but those fish still, you get too close to them or make a noise in that boat. I don't mean talking, but I mean banging around in there. They're gone. So you got to stay back. You got to be able to see your fly. You got to be able to make that cast to get it to them too. And there, again, I was mentioning about showing people the different dry fly casts. Most trout fishermen, especially here in the East, have not gotten in a drift boat. They're expensive. They do a day trip, not cheap. And you can do it. Depends, again, how dedicated you are. But if you do it, you want to be prepared to make these casts. And an awful lot of the time, if you're dry fly fishing, you're working in along the banks. You might hit times when the fish are rising out in the middle too, but an across and downstream as opposed to an upstream cast is going to be the way to go. And you need to make a cast across downstream and usually with a reach to try and lay as much of your line in that same current seam as you can. Otherwise, the fish are, you got bankside water, they're laying on the inside of all the little eddies. They're laying in slower water than you're anchored in out in that boat. Mm-hmm. And if you throw an upstream cast, you're going to get drag almost immediately. You have a hard time getting across. The fish are eating, they're right in that seam. They're on the bugs are on the fast water side of the seam. Those seams can be like an inch wide sometimes, a little wider than that most of the time, but not real big. You have to get your fly right in the right spot, and it has to stay there for a little while too. You can't slam this thing right on their head. You don't cast it 10 feet above them either, but far enough above that you don't scare them and close enough that it doesn't drag by the time it gets there. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. It's not like fishing for brook trout in the mountains with a royal wolf or something. And even the brook trout are a little smarter than people give them credit for, but still. Drag-free floats is what we all strive for. Oddly enough,
and on tricky rivers, the downstream presentation's better.
Yeah.
Get longer drifts. It's just a little harder to set the hook.
What I've found is those fish out west especially, they might be a little pickier. I don't have enough time on the Delaware with this kind of fishing. But I find when you fool them, they eat that fly. Not too much a problem with setting hooks. I mean, you just hope they don't have it down in their gill rake.
You got a little bit of an angle.
Oh, yeah. You got a little bit of an angle, and if you're sitting in the front of the boat, you can still strike sideways. If you're sitting in the back of the boat and you strike sideways, somebody's going to be mad at you. Yeah. Like the guy rowing.
Going to get somebody.
So, yeah, you're a little bit limited that way, but sometimes you can even make your line lay on the water in such a way that you can strike low, even though you're pulling back upstream. You have just enough of a loop in your line that you use the tension of the surface film tension on your line mm-hmm. to help you set that hook. And I like hooks that are like sticky sharp. It's harder for the fish to spit them out, and even if you don't get it really drilled into him on the first attempt, at least hopefully you still have enough of him. That hook is it's at least started to penetrate, and it'll penetrate once you get tight on them.
Are you sharpening your hooks out there, or you just?
I think when you first tie, these hooks that we have today are awesome compared to hooks that we even had just a few years ago. They're not going to be any sharper ever than they are right out of the box. But that doesn't mean they stay that way. If you hit a rock, even a hard spot in a fish sometimes, they get just the tiniest little curl on that hook point, and you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have to really yank to set a hook now. It's not sticky sharp anymore. So if I miss a fish or if I hit a rock, I almost always check that hook point. I do it by dig it into my fingernails. I can't get my lady clients to do that, but I just tell them, like, you can do whatever you need to, but you need to make sure your hook's sharp. They're not going to stick it in those fingernails. So mine usually end up pretty scratched up by the end of the season. But I want to make sure that hook's sharp, and I mean real sharp. And so I carry a little file with me, there are these diamond dust files that, to me, the shape is kind of rough, especially for smaller flies. It's hard to get in there. But if you were looking head on at the hook point, I kind of do a diamond shape. So it's like that. I'm sharpening 4 sides of that thing.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't have to do all of that. You can almost tell that the hook point, it's just bent one little direction, especially if you have that little curl at the tip. And just a couple of strokes to get rid of that.
So you're making four angles on the hook
inside, point. Inside, outside, outside. So that, kind of a square shape or diamond shape or whatever. Some people might just do say a triangle.
Triangle, yeah. I think it's easier. I don't know if it's as sharp.
I don't know. We used to debate all that, and some people like that, but then you're making cutting edges too. And there was some debate about whether that's not probably going to make a difference on a little trout hook, but when you're sticking a 5/0 into a tarpon's mouth, maybe it might. If
you're getting more knife blades on the edge and it can work itself out. That makes sense.
So I don't know. I haven't stuck any hooks in any tarpon, so I can't really speak to that.
So you're using the Paranymph for mayfly hatches. What are you using for caddis hatches, which is really the big thing when you're out west, I'm sure?
Well,
the Madison's a big caddis river.
I know the first time I fished the Madison with Joe Moore, who is one of the owners now at Big Sky Anglers. He wasn't then. He was living in a tent, more or less. But we had some PMDs on, and I was just smoking them on that Paranymph. He said, "What are you using?" Nobody had seen it before, out there especially. He goes, "We're in between my good spots," and I was catching fish regularly, but they were looking for them and whatever. But yeah, this year, mostly fished caddis. I might have caught a few on Parανymphs, but we didn't see many PMDs. Caddis flies, we were out there on the Madison right about the end of June, and there was a fair amount of stoneflies around. The Goldens hadn't gotten real heavy yet, but the big ones, the famous salmon flies, there were a fair amount of them around in spots. And everybody's read about it. Everybody wants to throw salmon flies. Well, after the first day, those fish 75, 85, 100 boats went through that stretch, and 70 of them are throwing salmon flies. Tomorrow, you go down through there with a salmon fly, and they run from them. Every now and then, you'll see a big explosion. One of them will get crushed. But, the nymphs crawl out on the bank, and then you're fishing these. If the wind blows some in the water, I don't know. I never fish them. I fish caddis flies. There's a gazillion caddis flies. So, one of the most famous caddis patterns today, the most popular ones, is born on the Madison, and that's Craig Matthews' X-Caddis. Real simple fly, a Zelon tail, a body, and a clump of deer hair on it. Good fly, but it's a low rider, and it's not easy for people to see. And anymore, when I'm looking at flies, I'm always looking at it. How are my guests, when I'm guiding, are they going to be able to fish this fly? And they can't see their fly. Especially the newer they are, the more trouble they have with that, because they just kind of throw it out there and then they try and find their fly. They don't aim it to a spot. As they get better at that, they pick their fly up better. But I played around with putting different stuff, underwings on there to make them float a little bit higher. CDC makes a beautiful fly, but now our fly's wet. And my fly's not floating. And I'm getting this guy out of the tree while that one's got a fly that he can't see because it's sinking. And you explain how to dry it, but again, if you're not familiar, it's not that easy. And on the Madison, if you're out there and you catch a fish, you got a CDC fly. By the time you finish fooling around with it, you just float it through 200 yards of water. So that you're not going to just throw an anchor out like you can on the Missouri. Back row and only go so far on there too. Is nobody can back row while you fool with your fly on the Madison. So I needed something I could get back into action pretty fast. And so I started putting a synthetic wing under it. And I was already putting sighters on to help my guests see in my guiding operations. So eventually I went to a synthetic underwing, and I've been using Parapost, but there's other stuff you could use. The sighter on that fly is just is egg yarn. Although I've been using other stuff. I've used a lot of stuff over the years.
What's the name of this fly?
I call it the Iron X because it's built like iron. And the real idea was there's enough synthetic under there to float that thing without even putting the deer hair on it. But everybody likes deer hair wings on their caddis flies. And that little cider, little pink cider, it took me 3 years to get Joe to say that you could really see that thing.
And what's the body?
The body, I just use hare's mask again. And I might have a few that are kind of like...
You're the hare's mask master.
Works, and I don't think that the colors are all that important on dry flies mostly. To the fish. They're looking up usually against a bright background. And they're just not that picky about the colors. It's size first, shape second. And if we can deal with color, that's more for us, I think. But maybe there's times, arguably, anything that breaks the surface now, the fish can see that color. I'm sure they can see the colors. How much does it matter? Sometimes maybe more, sometimes maybe less. But with that Iron X, I can, it's good, just egg yarn or synthetic cider on it. I tied them with orange. Joe goes, that orange works pretty well. I said, it's not as bright as that pink. We're drifting along on the Madison one day, and he's watching my fly, and I don't even think he thought about it. He just said, you really can see that pink. That pink really does show up, something to that effect. So I use the pink on it. I only have to tie that one color. Dun colored, Parapost underneath, a little bit of deer hair on top. I dubbed my hare's mask body on there kind of loosely, but it's still wound tight. I like it. The more it gets chewed up, I even hit it when I'm done tying it. I'll hit it with a little dubbing brush to roughen it up. That way I don't have to fool around wrapping hackle and everything on there.
How do you mix your hair mask? What do you do? You buy 10 masks? Like, what's the process?
Well,
when you're going into fly tying season.
I trim off the ears and everything down the center of the mask. The cheeks, if you folded the mask back onto the rabbit, are a different kind of fur. I'll trim that off too, but I don't use as much of that. I don't want too much of that in my hare's mask blend. You read some of the old books and some of the real North Country fly aficionados, talk to John Shaner and just they'd be horrified that I clip that whole mask and blend it because they're using off the ears for one kind of fly, the paw is the fur between the ears for another fly and so forth. I'm blending it.
So you just take all the stuff off the ears and then a strip down the eyes.
Between the eyes, more or less, yeah. All the way down, trim it off. And I'll kind of rough blend it by hand, but like a piece of newspaper or something, because, blending furs, you can make a big mess real fast. And you can't, I use a full-size blender, and you can't fit that one hare's mask. You can't fit all of it into a blender at once. So you do about half. Do that,
so you use
the
a
other
food
half,
blender.
When I was looking for a little food grinder blender, little coffee grinder type thing, which is what everybody used, I finally found them. They were $22 sitting next to a full-size one that was on sale for $19. So,
and these masks are all natural colored.
Yeah, for this fly.
Okay.
For the Paranymph as well. I have some other colors that a particularly chartreuse one. That's a pretty cool one when you blend it up. It's not, there's still some chartreuse in there, but it makes a real great body for granums and stuff. But I use that for nymphs mostly.
But the Paranymph and the iron caddis are natural colored.
Yeah.
hare's mask.
Natural colored. Iron X caddis, paying homage to its heritage from the X caddis. They actually carry these in the blue ribbon flies out in West Yellowstone now, which was the home of the original X caddis. So,
Craig Matthews' original shop.
yep, exactly. And they're tied by Montana Fly Company now. So, killer fly, I can catch a fish on that thing, and if we're on a good stretch and we want to get back out there real quick, I can squeeze it in my shirt or a piece of paper towel real quick, 1 or 2 false casts, and drop it right back out there. And we can get through that stretch. And at some point, might want to stop and regroup a little bit. And I think they like to anchor every now and then just to give their arms a break from rowing in that river, which is fine because that gives you time to regroup with your flies and everything else too. But it's killer on the Missouri as well, and that's all flat water. But on the Missouri, usually I fish it with the shuck and everything on the Madison because it seems to be fine. But on the Missouri, a lot of times I cut that shuck off because we're fishing dead caddis.
Spent.
They're beat, they're on the water, they're not hatching.
Yeah.
They don't have shucks on them. One of the first times I really did that, we were sitting under the bridge at Wolf Creek, and there's a boat launch right there. We were eating lunch or something, and there's no shade out there. So, we're trying to get out of the sun a little bit. We're sitting under this highway bridge, an old metal truss bridge. It's classic. Anybody, if you've seen any pictures of the Missouri, you probably saw a picture of that bridge, the Wolf Creek Bridge. So we're sitting under there, and we eat, and there's like this group of fish out in front of the boat ramp, up and down that little stretch there. I don't know why, but there's always a bunch of fish rising right in that area. And I almost never see anyone catch one. So we're sitting in there. Everybody's kind of like trying to keep from taking a nap after we eat lunch. And all right, I'm ready to go here. I grab a fly rod, jump out, and walk over there, and I'm working on these fish, and nothing. And I just had my rod. I didn't have my vest or any of my stuff with me, just the rod. And whatever that caddis was tied on there. So I thought, those are dead caddis. Some of them aren't moving at all. Some of them are hopping around a little bit. I just took my pocket knife out and cut the tail off, got a nice brownie on the next cast. So I also twitch these flies a lot. And this is kind of
I think spent caddis, one of those dead caddis, can be a very tricky hatch that a lot of people can't figure out.
This fly is my version of the CDC and elk, which Hans Weilman kind of originated, I guess. But again, I have a sighter on it. One thing I do on both of these flies too, tying with deer hair, a lot of people in these little caddis flies have a rough time because it's unruly. It wants to flare. You crank it down, and it's just whoosh, like that. I tie a little collar around the neck there, right where it's all tied in, a little dubbing collar. It's pretty fine, but it's a mixture of gray squirrel. Because again, I want those guard hairs that are, I like that nice, not a lot under for a lot more sticky
Gives
stuff.
it that shaggy look.
Yeah, that's all the legs and
a
stuff.
lot of little pin pricks
and I
in
mix
the surface
that
film.
with, I have a whole bag full of the clippings from when I was tying with CDC. And you would think like, God, it's like that much of one CDC. There's a few fibers on there, but I already have it in my hand. Scissors were in this hand. I cut the stem off and put all those fibers in a pile. Try and keep from blowing them away when they're on my desk. But eventually I get a bag full, so I mix almost 50-50 that squirrel and that CDC, and then I take some ice dub, and that's kind of like how much? Well, as much as you like in there. If you don't want to fool with all that, you'll probably just use the ice dub. A little sparkly, and also those little sparkly trailers. I like it. I don't know if it's that big a deal to the fish or not, but that collar was really to help tame the deer hair a little bit. But I also like it with little sparkly coming out of it, the ice dub, a few fibers of the CDC, and if I can get a guard hair or two from that gray squirrel to stick out, all that's good to me. Again,
and that's the body of this fly.
That's that collar.
The collar.
Yeah.
And how do you put it on? A dubbing loop or just dub it on there?
Just dub it on there. Not real tight. In other words, I don't want to spin it real
shaggy.
tight. But I wrap it, just maybe 2 turns on there, and it stays on. I mean, you want it to shag up a little bit. Again, I hit that whole fly with that dubbing brush. The one I use is just Wasatch Tools. I think they gave us some samples at one of the fly fishing shows, but it looks to me like a 22
So it's a
caliber.
mix of ice dub, leftover CDC clippings, and gray squirrel.
Yeah. I make a lot of my own dubbings. I mean, we worked in a fly shop there, Billy Skelton and I, and Billy had his little fur blend. We were dyeing rabbit fur, and some of it was natural, and trimming it and blending colors to get another color. We had an 18-color fur blend, 3 little stack packs, 6, in each stack. We sold 1 million of those things. Maybe
Master dubbing chefs,
so,
making your own special
in the back room of that
concoctions.
fly shop at the time, that was our work room. We dyed stuff. We cut deer up back then. We did all kind of stuff. You dump a whole pot of dye on the floor sometimes. It didn't matter. It was our work room. But
It's such a fun part of fly fishing, though.
oh yeah, I mean, you just
And the deeper you get into it, like dyeing your own hackles, creating your own dubbings, like you can create things
Absolutely.
that are totally your own. Or if you can't, you need to go to somebody who's a master and get them to dye it for you.
you like to think that you might have a fly that nobody else has.
Yes.
And for a while I did, but I've sold so many Paranymph particularly that I'm always fishing behind my own flies. Around at home, the local guys all have them. Now they sell them in the fly shops in West Yellowstone, Big Sky Anglers. And I don't know if Blue Ribbon has the Paranymph, but they have that caddis. I saw it on one website post they did.
Who ties that for them?
Montana Fly Company.
Montana Fly Company.
Some
All
kind-
these are with MFC or?
Paranymph, the Iron X is, not the second one that I showed, and a couple other of my patterns are with them too.
Eric Naguski, his book's up there, and I just remembered that he did a whole chapter on the Paranymph, and he
First
is
fly in
a
the book.
master fly tyer himself.
Oh, yes.
But he says in the book, if there's only one fly he could have for Pennsylvania, it would be the Paranymph, and that probably goes for a lot of other states too.
Covers a lot of bases, and it's generic. I've had people catch fish basically all over the world with that fly, all over Europe. This one guy used to get them from me at an English guy, fly shows in back in the Somerset days. And he's telling me, man, that thing really worked. He said, this guy operates a crane, a big, giant, huge crane. So they give them 4 days on and 10 days off or something. So they want them real mentally fresh when they're swinging this big piece of equipment around. But he says, I got off work and drove down through this little village and opened the boot of my car, the trunk, got my stuff out, walked down through the town, jumps in and fishing the itchin. I go, like, you're poaching? He goes, nobody said anything. He said, it worked real well there. I said, you're using my flies to poach on the itchin. He's laughing. But I know they fished from the chalk streams in England all the way down through the Balkans. One guy that fished with me a number of times, Korean guy, he moved back to Seoul. He ordered a pile of them from me before he went back to Seoul. He was fishing for Linok in the mountains in South Korea. Hopefully he didn't get too close to the DMZ, but I don't know where he was fishing. But both sides of the Andes, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, people have used them in all those places, all over this country.
How long have you been commercial tying?
I probably sold my first flies when I was working for Barry Serviente at the Anglers Art in Washington, D.C., and that would have been about 72-ish.
Over 50 years.
Yeah, but, I wasn't tying that many. And even what I tie today compared to somebody who's really tying a lot of flies, it's a lot more flies than most guys tie, but compared to other tyers, it's not a huge number.
How many flies do you think you've tied in your life?
Oh, I don't know. Probably just these Paranymph. I don't know. I'd guess between 20 and 50,000 of those.
50,000.
Just of that pattern.
That's a lot of flies.
I've been tying that fly for a long time. And I don't tie them I can't quite match the output today that I used to do. I used to guide all day, then come home, tie flies tie flies for 3 hours every day. I can't do that anymore. Now when I come home from a guide trip, I'm like done. I might mess around and tie something, but it's not going to be anything too much.
Well, you're at a stage where you probably you're not short on flies. If you're anything like me, I still tie flies for like special trips and stuff to get up, but a lot of times you have so many flies. I have flies from 20 years ago I'm still carrying around.
Flies from 50 years ago in my fly boxes. I have one of those classic Pennsylvania chest boxes. It's a 3-tray one, but it is
a Richardson?
Yeah. Rex Richardson built it. He's been dead for a long, long time. And mine still says, one of the parts, the back of it still says the Fye box, F-Y-E, because the guy who I think originated that whole thing was Bob Fye.
Oh,
so
really?
They're called the Fye box, but Rex, it says Rex Richardson. I never met him, but I talked to him on the phone I don't know how many times. Rex Richardson, he called it the Richardson chest fly box. But he still had parts that mine stamped with the Fye box, F-Y-E. And that was some of the original ones, I think. So that piece anyway goes back to the originator of the thing,
yeah.
I think. Mine's just, it's, the deep compartment is roughly a cubic inch. At one time I started pulling flies out of that one compartment just to see what I had in there. They were sulfurs, so they were all about size 16. I had like over 250 flies stuffed in that one compartment. So I'm probably pushing it again right now.
So you won't get caught flat-footed.
I
can't imagine you getting caught empty-handed in a sulfur hatch.
No, I'd probably be all right for that. But, every time you go, you get some kind of a new idea. Oh, man, I wish I had that fly. Especially you hit a tough day. Man, I wish I had something that's just whatever.
Every time you're on the water, you
Just
get
about
new
every
ideas
time.
about how to improve things. and
When I
stuff.
was tying for fun, strictly, because I still enjoy tying. There's times when I haven't tied these for a while, and I can't wait to get back to them. I'm working on a wet fly order for a guy down. He's size 14 wet flies, wound hackle, little paired mallard wings on them. I'm getting sick of those. I can't wait. I got like a ton of these on back order right now, so I'm going to be looking forward to getting back to those.
Let's talk about a hatch that's upcoming. Let me trade you.
Okay. Upcoming on the yellow breeches.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody's waiting for the white fly, which, as far as I know, is not on yet. I haven't seen any evidence. The brown drakes are around, but it's kind of too hot. The water's too warm to fish. But, yeah, big old Hexagenia spinners. You're not going to fish the hatch. I think they're night
And the
flies.
hexes are hatching now?
Yeah. They're
At night
definitely around.
or right before dark?
Mostly you're going to be, God knows, wee hours at night. Who knows? I think they dribble off. I don't think it's like a big, from 1 a.m. to 2:30 or something like that. It's just, they dribble off. You see them even in the daytime, a few. But the spinners concentrate. They all come back. Any of these different mayfly hatches, you can get, when the sulfurs first start in May, if you hit a cool, cloudy week, you'll get a trickle hatch kind of, say, from 1 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's great because the fish are looking for every one of them that comes by. And you can put on that Paranymph and just pound them. Mm-hmm. But the spinners are still going to concentrate. They're still going to come back en masse. They have to. It's the only efficient way for them to make a living.
So how do you tie this hex spinner?
So a lot of people will look at these extended bodies and tie them on a needle or something like that, or you see a lot of foam, variations of foam extended bodies tied on needles and then pulled off the needle and then tied on the fly. I don't do that. Everything's tied right on that hook. So I start off with thread on the hook, lay an underbody on there, and then I tie the tails on, moose mane. And I always put at least 5 on there because when I'm trimming it, a lot of times I end up clipping at least one tail off. And the fish, they don't seem to count the tails. So put an extra 1 or 2 on there in case they break or something. Oops. Getting away from me. Oops. And then the body itself is just, I tie a clump of that, it's probably elk hair on there. And then I rib it. I'm using a heavier thread, like a monocord or, say a 3/0 polyester thread would be something heavier so you can rib it with the same thread. It's not a delicate. It's not like tying little flies. So I rib it back and then a couple of turns here and then rib it forward and go ahead and I've already trimmed the butts pretty flat, so there's not a lot of trimming up there. You tie. I do all those, tie it off, a couple of quick, 2 or 3 turns of like a whip finish, but then I go back and put wings on, and you can see they're just grizzly hackle tips. And then there's 2 brown and grizzly hackle wound together. This one is not trimmed off, but a lot of them I trim them flat. So I figure you could carry some each way because I can twitch them when they first hit the water. And this is all right at dusk and dark and after dark. It can go on till I have no idea how late, but we used to stay out after the white fly until even after the whole white fly hatch was over for the season. These would still be around. And be midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, just about the time you think, oh, I don't hear any more fish rising. I think it's time to go. All of a sudden, they're out there pounding away again.
Is this the same hex that's hatching in Michigan in June? Or this is a different fly?
That's Limbeta. None other than Paul Weimer has identified these as Atrocordata or something like that. I'm not sure.
So it's a different Hexagenia.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's different than some of the ones that would be lake flies. A lot of the lake flies, like
Hexagenia is the genus, right, and this would be a specific species that's different.
So all I know is they're big. The fish couldn't tell the difference between one or the other. Cool hatch. I hear,
and we love it because we can see it very easily.
No, because
and big fish like it because it's a big fly.
We can't see it because it's dark. We can't see it at all. You're fishing by sound.
Yeah.
Walk,
the fish can
set the hook. Fish can see them. They're looking up at the bright sky. Even when it's pretty dark, that sky is still brighter to them looking up than us looking down.
Okay.
So, you make a...
I need to get some of those. I got a friend, Joe, who's tried to get me up to his place in Michigan for years and years, and I'm going in June, and they're doing it like last couple weeks of June, all night fishing.
Oh yeah, I guided some guys from up there one time, and we fished all day. And they were having a rough time dealing with that. They wanted to go night fishing.
Yeah, they're getting some big fish in the night.
Yeah, well, that's when the flies are around.
Yep.
And they're big flies, so they're obviously going to, and there's lots of them, so they're going to attract bigger fish. We've caught some pretty nice fish over the years on these things on the Breeches too. Again, you'll see the spinners. You're out there waiting for the white fly or fishing a white fly, and just before they start coming off in a given evening, these things are flying around about 4 or 5 feet above the water. They're all flying upstream to congregate over some riffle that only they know about. And they're hitting you, they're whacking you, and but they're not hatching then. So you got to wait till they come down. If they come down and there's a lot of white flies on too, there's going to be a lot more white flies than there is of these things. You might get a few minutes fishing to these, and the white fly count it takes over. But when the white fly hatch kind of peters out for the season, these still hang on for a while. So there's not a lot of other competition. There might be a few Cahill type things. There's still some bugs, but these guys they seem to be the deal.
That's a burrower?
A burrowing nymph, yeah.
They live in silty.
Yeah, which doesn't mean like soft mud. It means like sand and stuff like that, kind of, because they still have to breathe, and they make, I guess, a little burrow down in there. And there's still kind of water and whatever flowing around. That's why they have such giant, big gills, because they are living in an oxygen poor environment. So the nymphs have big gills on them. All the classic eastern green drakes and all the hex flies are very similar looking. Big nymphs, big fluffy gills on them. In fact, my nymph, which I did good with, we hit the brown drake, not the hexes, but the ephemera that's related to our eastern green drake, and exactly ephemera simulans. Our brown drake and the one they have out west is the same fly. So it's
the same insect.
Yeah. So we hit them we didn't get to fish them too much because we were trying to get the boats out of the water. It was the end of the day. The mosquitoes were brutal. So, you needed 2 hands to slap mosquitoes and 2 hands to fish. You had to take your pick. And I picked slapping mosquitoes, got away from the edge of the water. But I fished this nymph that I had. We hit some slow fishing. So I just started, well, can I throw? I'm going to throw this nymph I made up. And man, the big brown trout just crushed it. They had to know what it was, or what they thought it was. And it's so simple. Just took like a size 12 wet fly hook, standard hook, down eye, put a bead on it. And then I took like a feather from a partridge skin. It's kind of a body feather, back kind of along his flanks. It looks like marabou almost. But if you pull it out of there, the base of the feather is kind of gray, and the tips are kind of creamy colored with maybe a little tan cast to them. There's the nymph, the body, the gills, everything right in one feather. Tied that thing on with a little bit of dubbing and a little bit of maybe spun in a dubbing loop, pretty sparse, right up behind the bead to kind of be the thorax part of the fly. And throw that thing out and let it sink and then kind of jig it. Give you this kind of motion. You look at film of those nymphs swimming, exactly the same. And
a lot
the
of
fish
up and
just
down
pounded
swimming.
it. So I don't know how many I would catch. You probably could catch some fish on doing that with these things too. I know what the nymphs look like. I know some guys dug some up one time in a stretch. I don't know what they were looking for, but they end up with all these, big old mayfly nymphs, and that's what they were. That was in the breeches. This thing comes off all up and down the breeches, whereas the whitefly is limited to where it starts to get a little bit colder. No whiteflies up there. The whitefly is kind of a
they
real
like the
warm
warmer
water
stuff. There's a lot of white flies out on
These
the
guys don't seem to
Susquehanna and
care.
stuff.
These guys are on the Susquehanna, and they're on probably just about all these streams that dump into the Susquehanna. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of a bigger fly. Now I hear guys say like, well, you need a longer hook because of that extended body. Well, I'm telling you right now, when the trout are on these things, a 11-inch trout will suck that thing right down in his throat.
Yep.
They're
gulping the whole thing.
You don't
They
need
want
any
it all.
bigger hook or anything in there. And they'll get pretty beat up because that, kind of fragile. But until they're falling off the hook, keep throwing them. Because the spinners they get pretty beat up in a hurry anyway. Once they hit the water, they're dead. They get beat up. They look pretty rough. It's not going to always be this classic body with the wings laid out flat. A lot of times the wings are folded up. They're laying in, looks like a battlefield, only they're mayfly spinners. They're laying in every posture you can imagine. So that right there, that flies. And you just, real short line, get in close to them, fishing by sound a lot. Train comes by, you have to wait till the train goes away. Same thing with the whitefly. They're out there.
So you just
sucking
hear
the
them
spinners.
gulping and
Yeah. You can kind of tell when they eat yours, though. And if there's any doubt, set the hook anyway. You can get onto them pretty quick. Doesn't use a short rod. I mean, guys show up with 9-foot rods and stuff. Like, you want to throw 20, 30 feet of line, not in the dark. You want to fish shorter rods and fish close. We make little short leaders up because fishing close with a short rod and a 12-foot leader is a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
When you're fishing at night, anything that doesn't go right, you get tangled up, you're pretty much done for the evening. Even with white flies, guys are fishing 6X tippets, usually fishing 4X or 3X. With these guys, at least 2X. So you'll never turn them over. You'll be tangled up in a hurry and hate life. Hate night fishing, that's for sure. So things different world out there once the sun goes down. These are all tied for a friend of mine, so he just didn't pick them up this weekend. He's waiting on them.
looks like he's getting ready for a good time.
Yeah, I kept one or two for myself too. I have a box full of chewed up ones. I'll fish with them until they're gone. I had some of these. I took them out west, and we were on Henry's Fork, and the guy that was guiding us, he really likes to guide and fish that. So we were on the railroad ranch, and the brown drakes. Again, the classic simulans, not hexes. But again, the difference in how they look is immaterial. They don't hardly look different at all. But big old flies. And I had not this fly, although I gave him some of these, and he loved them. I'd like to get some more of those. I said, well, you could put an order in, You're not going to get them for free forever. But a lot of times I tip those guys. If I have flies, I tip them with flies. The other guys give them money, but they like my flies too. But we hit, these big spinners were coming down, and they were kind of spread out. He put me in this place. There was a big fish right in front of the tip of that island, and it showed up, but it was moving around a lot. And we were on unfamiliar water, and it was real mucky, muddy bottom, a lot of weeds, and every now and then there'd be a boulder out there. And we're fishing right at dusk. I'm thinking, like, I'm not waiting all over this place. Like, I'm not chasing that fish. So there was a side channel. Again, there was an island. There was the looking down the channel to the right. I could see 2 or 3 really nice fish rising down there. One rose. I saw a fish rise, and I saw it rise again. Well, I saw a fish rise again. It was a little closer to me. I threw my fly on it. Nothing. And he rose again, even closer to me. I threw my fly on it a second time. Boom, he ate it immediately. No drift. I mean, this fish was cruising. I threw that fly right on top of that fish. Boom, he ate it. Again, extended body. I think it had an upwing, like the classic paradrake that if you ever read Selective Trout by Richards and Swisher, that sort of a big old fly. And then, I didn't land that one, but he took me out almost into the backing. He's jumping all over. A 20-inch class, not a monster, but a good fish. Finally got me in the weeds, and they get leverage. He got off. It was fine. I got most of what I wanted out of him already, but there was a couple more down there. I thought, I got to make my move now or it's going to get too dark. Got out, eased in there, scared the one that was in the center of the channel. He would have come back, but again, time was starting to get loose, a little bit tight. And there was one in the eddy line across from me a little bit. And he's just pumping. This fish is like that big, 20-something. And just nose tail, just clobbering these things. And a nice concentrated line of drift, too. There was a bunch of flies coming over him. So I kind of measured my distance and then laid a cast over. Got him on the first cast. So I hooked 2 fish. I only made 3 casts all night.
Not bad.
And then Earl came down and caught the big one in front of the island with my rod. I said, I'm done. Go ahead, catch him. So it was fun just to have a couple of those along in case,
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to move away from fly tying and hatches and move into conservation. I know I run into you a lot. You're heavily involved in Cumberland Valley Trout Unlimited. I see you there all the time. And obviously, if we don't conserve our trout streams, we got nothing to fish for. We like fishing. But you and I both fish for hatchery fish in places where, that's what's there. But to me, there's a hierarchy of things, like I'll fish for carp and things that are, they're invasive species. I would love to catch a snakehead, which are an invasive species, but there's a hierarchy to all these things. And, I really think I enjoy wild fish are the next level, wild trout and native fish. Native trout to me are like the pinnacle of our sport. You go out west, like catching cutthroats in Yellowstone is like, to me, that's the epitome of fly fishing, or catching native brook trout in the east. Right now, there's an issue going on where, in Pennsylvania, we have Class A wild trout streams, and they're designated as Class A specifically so they can't be stocked. But we've got an issue coming now where the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission wants to put stocked rainbow trout in a Class A wild trout fishery with wild browns and native brook trout. And I know you went to the Fish and Boat Commission meeting and spoke up, right?
I didn't speak.
You were there.
I was there. It was an eye-opener. I'd never been to an actual commissioner's meeting like that, so something just said, you need to go to this one. See what's going on. So I knew some of what they were going to talk about. But I mostly kind of sat and watched, see what I could gather. But, it was pretty interesting. There was 14 people that were signed up ahead of time to speak. You didn't just get to raise your hand and walk up there. You had to sign up ahead of time. And 13 of the 14 spoke against the issue at hand. The 13 that did speak against it, I didn't see any commissioners really paying any attention at all to them, except for one or two. The other ones, I mean, you could pretty much tell how this whole thing was going to go immediately. I pretty much knew how it was going to go before I got there. But the issue is stocking a little stream up in Potter County that had been stocked, and they took it off the stocking list, and the biomass, particularly of brown trout, almost tripled in just a few years. And so there's a sportsman's club up there. I guess they have a co-op nursery, and that's what they do. We have one locally, and they do a good job of supplementing or stocking fish, basically. Stocking over wild populations is the big issue. And you had a Class A population. I like wild fish too. I agree with that hierarchy. Native fish would be ideal in a perfect world, but we have a lot of wild fish in places where the native populations have been suppressed for whatever reason, and they're not going to just come back as easily and quickly as some people would like to think. But they want to stock this stream, Freeman Run, and I've never been there. I don't even know exactly where it is, but the fact of them wanting to stock it, and this you'll see in other places, and I know, for instance, the LeTort, right through Carlisle, they stock a little section of it once a year. They have a big town festival or whatever, and they have a fishing derby. So you hear this all the time, oh, it's for the kids, it's for the kids. Well, it's not really for the kids. It's my opinion. I've seen as soon as the kids can fish from 9 till noon, man. I mean, at 12:01, the adults are right in there trying to, yank some fish out. They think they're getting some easy ones. I don't know. But stocking, if they were going to just, even a Class A stream, the fact of the matter is you're going to have to consider some of the social issues today. There's just no way around that. If they took that stream and they wanted to just rope off a 200-foot section or something like that and have a kids' derby some Saturday for whatever reason, I'm not crazy about that whole idea, but I don't think that would be a real detriment to the whole stream, and they could have their kids' derby. But they want to start stocking again a whole section. Section 4 is in question, which, from what I understand, is over 4 miles long. That's quite the kids' derby right there. So obviously not about the kids. What makes me the maddest about the whole thing is not even that they want to stock it over, even they shocked it. The fish, obviously, somebody on the commission directed staff. Many of these guys I know too, the staff people, and I think they're dedicated guys, but still have a boss. You have to do what the boss says, or you're not going to have a job. Had them design a study to see the impact of stocking rainbow trout on top of this wild trout population. And they kind of, if they just reversed it, they already have all that information, because when they quit stocking it, the biomass almost tripled in 3 years or something like that. So there was a definite increase once the stocking went away. Now they want to stock it again and study how this thing works, and to get a baseline on it, which they already had also, but they shocked it right in the middle of July, little freestone stream, hot and dry. They shock it in the middle of July, and I said, well, it still was 1.5 times the minimum biomass of wild brown trout, and they also found some brook trout in there. So anyway, they're designing this study to stock the stream. That backdoor way of doing it is what really made me mad. And following on that, another thing that came up, which isn't passed yet, it's probably now in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. I'm not real familiar how all that works. There'll be a 30-day comment period, which I don't think is open yet. And it'll probably pass at the commission meeting, quarterly meeting in October. And that, the commission basically abdicated its responsibility because the way the law is right now, if they want to stock a Class A stream, whether it's brown trout or brook trout or a mixed fishery or whatever, they have to bring that proposal before the whole commission. And there's some transparency there. But now, some of these streams can be stocked at the discretion of one person, just the executive director. Depends a little bit on the stream. There was some criteria, what the history of stocking there was. Is there brook trout in there? That has to still go before the entire commission. There's 8 commissioners and 2 boating commissioners. I think that's the makeup. So some of these decisions still have to go before them, but a lot of them can just go right in front of the executive director, who can say yay or nay. Nobody will even know.
Public meetings and no voting on it.
Nope, no transparency whatsoever. So that's what really made John Arway mad. That was the biggest thing. I'll put it that way. And there were a couple of commissioners who weren't too happy with it either. Eric Hussar, notably, but Charlie Charlesworth, and one other one. No, he didn't make too much of a fuss. But those 2, notably, were not happy with this, and they weren't happy with the abdication of their responsibility to approve these exceptions. Right now, we have, I think, 13 Class A trout fisheries that are stocked. And it started off, there was only going to be 10, and now there's 13. This opens the door for a lot more.
It's the camel's nose under the tent, really. I mean, somewhere you got to draw a line and just say, it's already a Class A wild trout stream. Why? And there's not that many of them. Why do we have to screw with it?
We have quite a few, but a lot of them are these little tiny little streams with tiny little trout in them. And okay, it's kind of neat to know they're there.
Freeman Run has big
Run, they got, when they shocked it in July, they got brown trout up to 23 inches, I think. Wild ones, not stock.
I saw the photos.
So, pretty impressive. I'm pretty sure that this is all going to get rubber stamped. I wasn't too impressed with the commissioners, who mostly didn't seem to pay attention to what anybody else was saying or wanted. If more people wanted it stocked, why weren't there more people there to testify in favor of that? It was 13 to 1 of people who you had to sign up beforehand to be able to speak. Why weren't there more people there speaking in favor of this? There was only one guy who also was a member of this club, and the commissioner whose district it was not present at the meeting.
Well, clearly they're reacting to social pressure, so we just need to keep putting on the social pressure to protect those wild trout streams.
And writing to the commission itself, I'm not sure is going to do it, because I didn't see that they cared what anybody thought anyway. Maybe writing to the governor might start doing it. A lot of Facebook stuff was going on after the meeting. One woman who was sitting right to my left was there, and I think it was the first commission meeting she was ever at also, but she wrote a pretty long thing. I wouldn't want her mad at me.
Writing to the governor might be the right idea, though, because he appoints all of the commissioners. Well, exactly. So that's a good way to go.
Somebody made a comment on her thread about, they should be all qualified, some kind of fisheries backgrounds and things like that. There's 8 or 10 fiefdoms represented on this board, and all of them are political, because to get nominated to be on the board, you're really looking at your local legislators. Somebody's going to have to get you hooked up with your local representative in the state house who can recommend you, and ultimately, if you get on, the Senate is going to confirm you. So it's all political. And I suppose there's no way about it, but if you divide up all the license buyers, there's a smaller percentage that are interested in fishing for Class A wild trout streams and artificial lures or fly fishing or whatever than, say, the opening day crowd and the people who like to fish for stock trout. And I don't think any of us are super against I mean, in today's times and social issues as they are, you're going to have stock trout. It's fine. There's a lot of places you wouldn't have any trout fishing if you don't stock some trout. There's a lot of places you have a few wild trout. That doesn't mean that's going to make a wild trout stream all of a sudden if you just quit stocking it. That wild trout might increase, but as far as is that going to make a Class A stream, that's hard to say. Some of them may, especially if you gave them a little help with some stream improvements and so forth, because we've been beating our streams up for close to 300 years. The extraction industries, whether it's mining, which has certainly devastated a number of miles of streams in Pennsylvania, but maybe even worse is the logging industries. If you look at streams around, including one not very far away from where we sit right now would be Clark's Creek. That whole valley's been logged I don't know how many times. And you look at places as you're fishing along, it looks like the creek used to run back over here to the left. It doesn't now, it goes straight. And you fish a little further down, it looks like the creek used to come back in here. Well, it did. Mm-hmm. It's a valley stream, and valley streams meander. Streams that have higher gradient are straighter, but low gradient streams tend to meander a lot. And if you're floating logs down a stream, and even today, there's a lot of areas where you're just not, there's no road in there. How are you going to get all that timber out that you just cut? You're going to drag it to a central location. You're kicking it in the stream and floating it at some appropriate time. So you don't want bends. You get log jams. The most dangerous job in history probably is untangling those log jams. So you want them to go straight. You want that stream straight. You straighten the stream out. Now you made 3-5 miles of stream into 3.5 miles or something. So all the water runs off faster. You've shortened up your mileage of water. And I know some guys that thought they were going to get the Fish Commission to quit stocking parts of Clark's Creek, and it would suddenly turn back into a native brook trout stream because there was some wild brook trout in there. Native, I don't know. Been stocked with brook trout for 100 years. But I just told them, you guys better be careful what you wish for, because I don't think it's going to work. And I explained to them about all those meanders that have been cut off to make the stream go straight. And, if they quit stocking it, they're not going to start again right away. So you guys are going to they'll hold it over.
Well, taking a stock stream and somehow turning it into a wild trout stream is, that's a different thing than you've already got a wild Class A trout stream.
Absolutely.
And you want to stock. Conservation means protect what you've already got. I mean, we're not expecting anyone to work miracles, but you already got a Class A wild trout stream. There's no need to mess. There's no need to mess with it, right?
What's wrong with that?
Just leave it.
But now the kids can't fish. Well, if you don't tell the kids.
Kids can fish somewhere else.
Won't care.
There's a lot of other places.
Right
there. Yeah.
And they'll learn how to fish. They'll learn how to catch those fish. But this, man, everybody gets fired up. Boy, when you see a big pool at the bridge and you can see 50 of them swimming around out there. Boy, everybody likes that. So
somehow we figured out how to do it when we're kids, right?
Yeah.
Hey, before we sign off on this, how do people get in touch with you if they want to hire you as a guide or get you to tie some flies? What's your contact?
Well, I don't have a website. Everybody tells me I should have one, but
no website.
When I'm busy, I wouldn't have time to fool around with a website. When I'm not busy, having a website isn't going to make me busy. That's my philosophy on them. So I have an email address. It's BALTZTE, my last name and first and middle initial, at AOL.com. You can contact me through the Orvis website, too. If you get on Orvis.com and search around on there and find fishing trips, click on Pennsylvania. You'll find the endorsed operations on there. And you can click on my name and see a little bit about the streams that I fish. And my contact info's on there, whether you want to book a trip, get some info on that, or whether you just want to order flies or whatever. So those are probably the two best ways.
And they can buy your flies through Montana Fly Company, clearly.
Several of my most popular patterns are being produced by Montana Fly Company. So you have to find a dealer for Montana Fly Company, but they're growing and growing. A couple of places out west have them, and hopefully soon, I don't know when that is, TCO Fly Shops in Pennsylvania, and they have 5 locations. They'll have them. and any other shop that deals with Montana Fly Company. And they could buy, anything. That shop may carry fly tying materials or flies or whatever that MFC produces and packages. So they're available through those places. If you go directly through me, my flies might be a little bit better. I'm not tying them in as great a numbers, and I know how I want them tied since I made them up in the first place. But you're going to be on a waiting list.
You're going to have to get in line.
So I'm still back ordered with spring orders right now, and we're in the middle of August. So I'm pecking away at them, but there's an amazing amount of things that can divert your attention.
For sure. Like fishing.
Yeah, well, I'm not fishing all that much myself. We had a pretty good guide season. We're doing a trip here and there. We had a kind of cool week last week, and we did some morning trips. The fishing's pretty tough on the Breeches right now, and of course, it's never easy on our local spring creeks. But hopefully, the weather's going to cool off. We might start to get a little bit of rain. I don't know if there's a hurricane coming at us. I don't think it's going to get us, but we could use a soaker right now. I don't want to see anything flooded. That's not good for anybody, but boy, we could use some rain. We haven't had any rain at all for going on 3 weeks.
Yeah,
so
it's been a little
it's
dry
hot
lately. Well, thank you very much for coming into the studio today. It was a great conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Love chatting with you. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.